Welcome back, everyone. I am Sam, and today, guys, we're going to be talking about the best and the worst enduro bikes to buy as a beginner. So stay tuned for that. All right, before we jump into the best and the worst enduro bikes for beginners, if you're not already a subscriber, guys, please hit that subscription button. It really helps me out. We're trying to grow this channel as quickly as possible. Let's get to 1,000. So hit that thumbs up as well. And if you guys want to help out the channel financially, we do have a Rocky Mountain ATV link in the description where I get a small commission for the parts and the dirt bike gear you're already buying. So I really appreciate that, and thanks in advance. All right, first, let's talk about what's considered an enduro bike. So really there's two options we have. So an enduro bike is like a full-fledged hard enduro race bike, like this KTM 300 XCW, and then you have like trail type bikes. And those are really the two differences. Now enduro bikes back in the day also meant they were like a dual sport, a street legal. We're not really going to talk about that. We have another video you can go check out if you're more interested in street legal bikes. All right, typically an enduro bike or a trail bike is used for riding single track or trails or even really technical terrain. And typically these bikes are going to have like a softer suspension setup. They have gearing, and also the sprockets are set up to be able to go slower, and so kind of like a lower gearing setting. They also have a frame that allows you to turn tighter. They have electric start, kickstand, 18-inch rear wheel, and also a lot of times they have a headlight for those after dark missions. All right, with any dirt bike, when choosing the right dirt bike, the one thing you want to remember is to choose a bike that allows you to build the proper technique, that is easy to ride and is not so much power that you can barely hold on. Because if the bike has too much power, then essentially you are going to be worn out quicker, which doesn't allow you to create the proper riding techniques, and it doesn't allow you to stay fresh, which means it wears you out quicker and you get injured or hurt, and we want to avoid that at all costs. When I first got started out, I had no one to teach me how to ride a dirt bike, and I learned all the bad habits. And so over the years, I've been trying to break those habits. One of the resources I use is I have a buddy, Josh Knight, who is a pro racer, and he has an online course that you can take that shows you from beginning to advance. It has tons of information. Anything you wanted to learn about riding a dirt bike, he's got it in that course. Link in the description, guys. Go check that out. All right, let's talk about the best and worst enduro bikes that you can get as a beginner. Now, before I say anything, I want to give a little disclaimer. Any dirt bike you have in the garage is better or is the best bike you can have. Does not matter. And now, even if it's a motocross bike and you want to go out and ride single track, you could definitely ride single track. Is it built for that? No. Is it going to be harder to ride? Absolutely. So we're going to talk about a couple different options. Like I mentioned, we have like the hard enduro race bikes, and then we also have more like a trail bike. And we'll talk about those differences later in this video. All right, so like I said, if you want to get out riding and you're just getting into the sport, just beginning, you want to find a bike that is easy to ride, that's comfortable, and that you are not afraid of, and you can learn the right proper technique, like I mentioned. So the worst bikes, the worst enduro bikes that you can buy for a beginner are going to be any big bore four-stroke. So a four-stroke that's maybe like a 450 or a 500, even a 350. Now Beta makes like a 390, 490. There's anything above the 300cc motor in a four-stroke is going to be more difficult to ride. And the reason for that is, even though they're fantastic bike like the KTM 450 XCW or the Beta 390 or the Beta 300, the Sherco 300, or the Honda CR 450X or the WR 450 from Yamaha. All of those are fantastic bikes, but because they have a big four-stroke motor in them, like a 450, they have a lot more rotating mass. Rotating mass makes the bike feel heavier, they're harder to control, meaning you wear out faster riding them, and typically can get whiskey throttle. Google that if you don't know what that is. And those are things you want to avoid when you're a beginner. The other thing that a big 450 does is when you're riding it slow, which usually what you want to do when you're starting out, you got to learn how to ride slow before you can ride fast, is you want to make sure that the bike doesn't flame out. And big bore four strokes just plain and simple, they flame out more than a smaller bore 4-stroke or even a 2-stroke. So weight, flame out, tons of power. That's the reason why the 450 4-strokes or big bore 4-strokes are the worst enduro bikes you can buy. Now let's talk about the best enduro dirt bikes you can learn on. All right, so trail bikes are generally going to be the easiest bikes to ride. Now, when I say trail bikes, typically these are going to be pretty mild powered, lower suspension type of bikes. And some of those manufacturers are like Honda, Kawasaki, and Yamaha. They have trail bikes. And so these bikes have a lower seat height. And so like the Honda CRF 250F, it's a fuel injected bike. The Yamaha TTR 230, which is a carb. And Kawasaki has a couple options, Kawasaki 230 and the 300, which both are going to be fuel injected. And I'll put the seat height, the average seat height up here on the screen and some stats of each of these bikes. Now these bikes, these are air cooled, so more mild power, and they have soft suspension and they are manual clutch, so you'll be learning how to ride them. The downside is if you're larger than like 5'11", standing up on them, you're going to feel cramped, and if you weigh over 180 pounds, the other thing is you'll probably be too heavy for the suspension. So those are some of the downsides with those bikes, which means you're going to grow out of, you know, the Honda or the Yamaha TTR, the 250 or the 230 type trail bikes pretty quickly, but they're fantastic to learn on. They're really reliable, they're easy to ride, they don't kill you if you accidentally get on the throttle, and you're most likely not going to get whiskey throttle, and they also don't flame out that much. They're pretty decent going really, really slow. The other downside is they're actually pretty heavy because there's not a lot of technology in them. Typically, most of them weigh above 250, 260 pounds, and even that Kawasaki KLX 300, I think, is almost 290 pounds, which is pretty heavy for a bike. So those are the easiest bikes. Now let's get into some other options if you kind of want to skip that and jump ahead to something that's a little bit more racy but still pretty decent and easy to ride. And so these are like a full-size bike. So the Honda CR 250X and the Yamaha WR 250 are bikes that are built off the motocross platform, so they're going to be taller than the trail bikes, still have a lot of suspension, and you won't feel cramped on them. They can handle, you know, a little bit more weight on top of that. And then also they are electric start, kickstand. They have, you know, 18-inch rear wheel, and they come with a light. So those are really good options. And generally you can pick up a used one for a pretty decent price. I don't know, for whatever reason Honda dropped for 2022. They don't have the Honda CR 250X in the lineup, but anyway, that's another story. If I had to pick between the two, I'd go Yamaha. I feel like the WR 250 is a more reliable bike because of some of the older models on the Hondas with the valves just aren't as good. But that's an argument for another day. Now, so maybe you don't even want to go 4-stroke. You actually want to go 2-stroke. So there's a misconception, especially if you're older and rode some of the bikes, you know, 2-strokes from the 80s and 90s, where they were just crazy fast, and it was like nothing, then everything. And that was kind of the old 2-strokes of, you know, the 70s, 80s, and some of the early 90s. Now, that's totally changed. Modern 2-strokes are actually better and easier to ride in single track and hard and technical terrain. And here's why. So less rotating mass, so the 2-stroke has way less moving parts than a 4-stroke does. And it's really just about where the power is delivered. And so some of that is going to be, you know, in your gearing and also kind of what sprockets you have. But these new 2-strokes have electric start, they have kickstand, they have a light, they have a rear wheel, and some of the KTMs even have fuel injection. So really cool bikes out there to be able to 2-strokes that you can choose from. So let's start from like kind of the easiest one. Now there's another manufacturer out of Europe that's called Beta. And Beta makes an X-Trainer 300. Don't be fooled by the 300. It's a really detuned 300 motor. It's actually got a tighter and smaller frame than a full-size bike, and it's really easy to ride. Electric start, motors through everything, great single track and hard enduro bike. Then you go to its older brother, which actually has more power, which is the Beta 200 RR. It's a little bit bigger, has more power, but it's also a great bike. We actually have one in the garage, and it's one of my favorite single track and hard enduro bikes. Now, KTM, which also owns Husqvarna and Gas, we're going to lump that all into one. KTM makes a KTM 150 XCW, and this is actually a really good bike. Like I said, it's got the same frame as its big brother, like this 300, and it's going to be a bike that you can learn on. The new ones have fuel injection. The old ones are carbureted, but it's a great do-it-all bike. Does really good in single track. Feels really light. Feels like a mountain bike with a motor, to be honest with you. We've owned one. We owned a 2017, and we really liked it, and it was a fantastic bike. So those are some of the best bikes to choose from. You can choose from the trail bikes in the 4-stroke and also in the 2-strokes for those that are beginning. Now, can you ride a big bore 450 or even like a KTM 300 2-stroke as a beginner? Absolutely. But make sure you get the riding proper technique, the proper gear, and get some training. It'll save you a lot of time and possibly pain and money. And you know, the whole goal is to be out there and having fun and be out on the trails with our friends and our family. And I get asked a lot all the time, like, would a 300 2-stroke be a good beginner bike? And the answer is, yeah. Actually, I'd buy a 300 2-stroke over a big bore 450 if I was beginning, just because of the rotating mass, the weight, and these new 300 2-strokes have a big piston and they are fantastic at lugging. And so they don't kill. You can upshift and still lug around. And so that's an option if you wanted to just kind of skip those in-between bikes, because sometimes you grow out of those pretty quickly and you want to make sure that you use your money wisely. All right, guys, let me know what I've missed in the comments below. I appreciate you watching. Also, if you haven't already hit that subscribe button, hit the subscribe button. Appreciate it. And we'll see you guys out on the trail.